I thought I knew who I was, till a simple DNA test destroyed everything I believed about my family. What I discovered didn't just prove my dad wrong, it shattered the very foundation of my existence. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the truth isn't meant to set you free, it's meant to break you. Growing up, I was always told I was the spitting image of my mother. Same green eyes, same stubborn chin, same way of laughing that made my shoulders shake. But there was one person in my family who never saw the resemblance. My dad, Robert. I'm Sarah. I'm 28 now, but this story takes me back to when I was 25. Living in Portland, working as a graphic designer, and absolutely convinced that my father was just ... difficult. You know the type. The man who always had something to say about everything, especially when it came to me. My parents, Robert and Linda, had been married for 32 years when all this started. They met in their early 20s at a church social, and according to family legend, my dad knew immediately that Mom was the one. They got married within a year, bought a little house in the suburbs, and tried for kids right away. But here's where it gets complicated. They struggled with infertility for almost 8 years. 8 long years of hoping, trying, doctor visits, and heartbreak. My mom would tell me stories about how they deconverted the spare bedroom into a nursery 3 different times, only to pack everything away again when another attempt failed. Then, miraculously, Mom got pregnant with me. I was born in 1998, their miracle baby, the child they'd prayed for and waited for through nearly a decade of disappointment. You'd think this would make me the apple of my father's eye, right? Wrong. From my earliest memories, something felt off between my dad and me. Don't get me wrong, he wasn't abusive or anything like that. He provided for us. He was there for school events. He taught me how to ride a bike. But there was always this ... distance. This coldness that I could never quite understand. While my mom would brag to neighbors about my art projects or my good grades, Dad would just nod politely and change the subject. When I won the state science fair in high school, Mom cried happy tears and hung my ribbon on the refrigerator. Dad said good job and went back to watching TV. The weirdest part was how he'd react to compliments about me. Whenever someone would say, "Oh, Sarah has your eyes, Robert," or "She definitely gets her intelligence from her father," he'd get this uncomfortable look on his face and quickly deflect. "She's all Linda," he'd say, or "must be from her mother's side." I got older. This started to really bother me. I'd catch him staring at me sometimes with this expression I couldn't read. Not anger exactly, but not love either. More like he was trying to solve a puzzle that frustrated him. My mom always defended him. "Your father loves you, Sarah. He's just not good at showing emotions. Some men are like that." She'd remind me about how he worked double shifts when I needed braces. How he drove me to soccer practice every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 years. How he paid for my college without complaint. And she was right about all of that. But love, I was never sure about that part. The tension between us reached a breaking point during my college years. I was studying art and design, which Dad thought was impractical. Every phone call home turned into a lecture about switching to business or accounting, something stable and realistic. When I announced I was moving to Portland after graduation to work for a small design studio, he didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. "You're making a mistake," he finally said when he called. "You're going to struggle your whole life, and for what? Some artistic dream." That's when I snapped. "Why do you hate everything about me?" I shouted into the phone. "Why can't you just be proud of me for once? I'm following my passion. I'm making good money. I'm happy. Isn't that enough?" There was silence on the other end. And then he said something that haunts me to this day. "Sometimes happiness isn't enough, Sarah. Sometimes you need to face reality." What reality? I was doing well. I had a great job, a cute apartment, good friends. I was living my best life, and somehow that wasn't good enough for my own father. That conversation was the catalyst for everything that followed. I became obsessed with proving him wrong, with showing him that I could be successful doing exactly what I loved. Every client I gained, every promotion I received, every piece of positive feedback, I'd email him about it, hoping for some sign of approval. He'd respond with short, polite messages. "Glad to hear it. Good for you. Keep up the good work." But never pride, never excitement. Never the enthusiastic support I craved. My mom would call separately to gush about my achievements, but even she started to sound strained. "I wish your father would show more excitement," she'd admit. I don't understand why he's so reserved about your success. By the time I turned 25, I was tired of walking on eggshells around my own father. I was tired of feeling like I had to earn his love, like I was somehow not worthy of his approval. I was tired of family gatherings where he'd engage enthusiastically with my cousins but barely acknowledge me. So I decided I was going to settle this once and for all. I was going to prove to him and to myself that I was his daughter, that I deserved his love and respect, and that his coldness toward me was unfounded and unfair. I just never imagined that in trying to prove my father wrong, I would discover that he had been right all along. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving. Dinner in 2023. I had driven up from Portland to spend the holiday with my parents, feeling particularly good about my life. I'd just landed a major client, a tech startup that wanted me to design their entire brand identity, and I was excited to share the news. The dinner started normally enough. Mom had made her famous stuffing. Dad carved the turkey with his usual precision, and we made small talk about the weather and my drive up. But then my Aunt Carol, Mom's sister, arrived with her family, and everything shifted. Carol has always been the type of person who speaks without thinking, but she's also incredibly observant. As we were sitting around the table, she started reminiscing about old family photos. "Linda, remember that picture of Sarah when she was about 5? The one where she's wearing that yellow sundress?" Carol laughed, gesturing with her fork. "I was looking at it last week when I was helping Mom organize her albums. You know what struck me? Sarah looks absolutely nothing like either of you in that photo." The table went quiet. Not the comfortable kind of quiet, but the awkward, tension-filled silence that makes your skin crawl. Mom forced to laugh. "Oh, Carol, you know how kids change as they grow up. Sarah definitely has my eyes." But Carol wasn't letting it go. She'd had a couple of glasses of wine, and when Carol drinks, she says exactly what she's thinking. "No, I mean it. I've been looking at family photos for weeks now, and Sarah doesn't look like anyone in our family. Not you, not Robert, not even your parents or his parents. It's actually kind of remarkable." I tried to laugh it off. "Maybe I'm adopted," I joked, hoping to break the tension. That's when my dad dropped his fork. The sound of metal hitting the plate echoed through the dining room, and everyone turned to look at him. His face had gone completely white, and he was staring at his hands like they might disappear. "Robert," my mom asked, her voice tight with concern, "are you okay?" He stood up abruptly. "I need some air," he mumbled, and walked out onto the back porch, leaving the rest of us staring after him. The dinner continued, but the mood was ruined. Carol kept apologizing, saying she didn't mean anything by it, that she was just making conversation. My mom kept insisting that Dad was probably just tired, that he'd been working long hours lately. But I could see something in her eyes. Confusion, maybe even fear. After dinner, I found Dad sitting on the porch swing, staring out at the bare November trees. I sat down next to him, unsure of what to say. "Dad, you okay?" Carol didn't mean anything by what she said. You know how she gets. He didn't look at me. For a long moment, we just sat in silence. And then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Sometimes I wonder if you'd be happier not being my daughter." "What?" I turned to face him, but he was still staring straight ahead. "You're so different from me, Sarah. Different interests, different personality, different everything. Maybe that's why we don't connect. Maybe that's why I can't." He trailed off. "Can't what?" Finally, he looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Pain. Real deep pain. "Can't love you the way a father should love his daughter." Those words hit me like a physical blow. All my life, I'd suspected he didn't love me the way other fathers love their daughters, but hearing him admit it out loud was devastating. "Why?" I whispered. "What did I do wrong?" "Nothing," he said quietly. "You did nothing wrong, Sarah. That's what makes this so hard." I left that night more confused and hurt than I'd ever been. The drive back to Portland was a blur of tears and angry music. I kept replaying his words over and over. "Can't love you the way a father should love his daughter." But Carol's observations stuck with me too. Over the next few days, I found myself looking through old family photos on social media, really studying them for the first time. And you know what? She was right. I didn't look like anyone in my family. My parents both have brown eyes. Mine are green. My dad is tall and lanky. I'm short and curvy like no one in my family. My mom has straight, fine hair. Mine is thick and wavy. Even our facial features were completely different. I started asking my mom questions. Casual questions at first, then more pointed ones. Mom, do you have any pictures of yourself when you were my age? Mom, was I a difficult baby? Did I look different when I was born? Mom, do you remember being pregnant with me? Were there any complications? Her answers were always vague, always deflecting. Oh, it was so long ago. You were a perfect baby, sweetheart. Why all these questions suddenly? But the more I pushed, the more uncomfortable she became. And then I noticed something else. Whenever I brought up my birth or early childhood, she'd change the subject to my dad's behavior at Thanksgiving. He's been so stressed at work, she'd say. You know how he gets when he's overwhelmed. That comment he made doesn't mean anything. But it did mean something. Combined with Carol's observation, with the lack of family resemblance, with the lifetime of emotional distance, it meant everything. The final straw came 2 weeks later, when I was visiting my grandmother on my mom's side. Grandma Rose had always been my favorite relative, warm, funny, and brutally honest. We were looking through her old photo albums when she made an offhand comment that changed everything. You know, Sarah, you remind me so much of my neighbor's daughter from back in the day. Sweet girl named Patricia. She had your same green eyes and that stubborn chin. Such a shame what happened to her family. What happened? I asked, not really paying attention. Oh, it was quite the scandal. She had an affair with a married man, got pregnant, and disappeared. This was back in the late 90s. People talked about it for years. My blood turned to ice. Late 90s, that's when I was born. Grandma, I said carefully, what was Patricia's last name? Goodness, what was it? Martinez, I think. Or Morales. It's something with an M, why do you ask? I couldn't answer. I couldn't breathe. Because suddenly, everything made horrible, perfect sense. That night, I made a decision that would change my life forever. I was going to take a DNA test. Not just any DNA test. I was going to get the most comprehensive ancestry and paternity test available. I was going to prove once and for all that I was Robert's daughter. I was going to shove those results in his face and force him to confront his inexcusable treatment of me. I was so sure I was right. I was so sure he was wrong. I had no idea I was about to discover that my entire life had been built on a lie. The decision to take a DNA test consumed me for weeks. I'd find myself staring at the computer screen at 2 a.m., reading reviews for different testing companies, comparing accuracy rates, scrolling through customer testimonials. It became an obsession. Part of me was terrified of what I might find, but a bigger part of me was absolutely furious. Furious at my father for treating me like a stranger my entire life. Furious at the possibility that there might be some twisted reason behind his coldness. And furious at myself for caring so much about the approval of someone who clearly didn't want to give it. I started with research. Hours and hours of research. I learned about paternity tests versus ancestry tests, about Y-DNA versus mitochondrial DNA, about false positives and contaminated samples. I read horror stories about families destroyed by unexpected results, and heartwarming tales of people finding biological parents they never knew existed. But the more I read, the more convinced I became that I was overthinking this. I was Robert's daughter. Had to be. Yes, I didn't look like him, but genetics are weird, right? Kids can look like great-grandparents they've never met. I was probably just unlucky in the genetic lottery, inheriting some recessive traits from distant relatives. The Patricia story from Grandma Rose was just a coincidence. A woman with green eyes who had an affair in the late 90s that could describe hundreds of women. I was letting my imagination run wild because I was hurt and angry. Still, the doubt gnawed at me. Every time I looked in the mirror, I found myself searching for some resemblance to my parents. Every family photo became a forensic examination. I even went so far as to create a side-by-side comparison on my computer. Me at various ages next to my parents at similar ages. The differences were ... stark. My breaking point came during a video call with my best friend, Jessica, 2 days before Christmas. She'd been listening to me agonize over this for weeks, and she finally snapped. "Sarah, just take the damn test," she said, her face filling my laptop screen. You're driving yourself crazy with all this speculation. Either he's your dad, or he isn't. Either way, you'll have an answer. But what if?
What if what? What if you find out he's not your biological father?
Then at least you'll understand why he's been such an ass to you your whole life.
What if you find out he is your father? Then you can confront him about his shitty parenting with scientific proof.
She made it sound so simple, but it didn't feel simple. It felt like I was about to open Pandora's box.
I'm scared, Jess, I admitted. What if everything changes?
Everything has already changed, she said gently. The moment he said he couldn't love you the way a father should, everything changed. At least this way, you'll know why. That night, I ordered the test. I chose one of those comprehensive DNA kits that promised not just paternity information, but full ancestry breakdown, health predispositions, and relative matching. If I was going to do this, I was going all in. The kit arrived 3 days after Christmas in a discreet white box that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I stared at it for hours before opening it. Inside was a simple collection tube, some instructions, and a prepaid shipping envelope. Such ordinary objects to potentially append my entire existence. The instructions were straightforward. Spit in the tube, seal it, mail it back. But actually doing it felt monumental. I must have picked up that tube a dozen times over the next 2 days, unscrewing the cap, then screwing it back on without providing a sample. I kept thinking about my dad's face at Thanksgiving dinner, how white he'd gone when Carol mentioned I didn't look like anyone in the family. I thought about all the times he'd deflected compliments about family resemblance, all the times he'd seemed uncomfortable with my very existence. But I also thought about the good times. Few as they were, they did exist. It's teaching me to parallel park in the empty mall parking lot, staying up all night to help me finish a science project I'd procrastinated on, driving 3 hours to pick me up from college when my car broke down, no questions asked. If he wasn't my biological father, did those moments mean less? Did his reluctant care mean nothing? Or did it mean more, because he'd chosen to be there despite having no biological obligation? I called my mom on New Year's Eve, ostensibly to wish her a happy new year, but really to fish for more information. Mom, I've been thinking about what Aunt Carol said at Thanksgiving, ... Oh, honey, you know Carol? She drinks too much wine and says whatever pops into her head. Don't let her silly comments bother you. It's not just that. I've been looking at family photos, and I really don't look like anyone in our family. Not you, not Dad, not grandparents on either side. There was a long pause. Genetics are complicated, Sarah. Sometimes children don't resemble their parents much. It doesn't mean anything. But Mom, what if? Sarah. Her voice had an edge I'd rarely heard. What are you really asking me? This was it. This was my chance to ask directly, to give her the opportunity to tell me the truth if there was something to tell. I'm asking if Dad is really my father. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Sarah, your father loves you. He's not good at showing it, but he loves you. Don't let one bad conversation ruin your relationship with him. She hadn't said yes. She hadn't said no. She'd deflected, just like she always did. Mom, that's not what I asked. It's the only answer I can give you, sweetheart. Some questions are better left unasked. After we hung up, I sat staring at the DNA kit on my kitchen counter. Some questions are better left unasked. But some questions eat you alive if you don't ask them. That night, January 1st, 2024, I finally did it. I spit in the tube, sealed it up, and walked it to the mailbox before I could change my mind. The act felt both anticlimactic and terrifying. Just saliva in a tube, but potentially life-changing information. The company website said results would be available in 4 to 6 weeks. 6 weeks had never felt so long. Every day I'd check the tracking information, then the company portal, watching for any update. Sample received, sample being processed, analysis in progress. I couldn't concentrate at work. I snapped at friends. I avoided my parents' calls because I was afraid I'd blurt out what I'd done. The waiting was torture, but I also dreaded the end of the waiting. Because deep down, underneath all my righteous anger and determination to prove my father wrong, a small voice kept whispering. What if he's not wrong? If there's a reason he could never love me the way a father should? What if I'm not his daughter? On February 14th, Valentine's Day of all days, I got the email. Your DNA results are ready. I stared at that email for 3 hours before I finally clicked the link. I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop when I finally opened the results. Looking back, that was probably the worst possible place to have my world collapse. But at the time, I thought being in public would force me to stay calm. I thought the background noise of espresso machines and casual conversation would somehow cushion whatever blow was coming. I was so wrong. The website loaded slowly, probably due to my shaking hands making it hard to hold my phone steady. First came the ancestry breakdown to 45% Irish, 23% Mexican, 18% Indigenous American, 14% Spanish. That was ... unexpected. My parents had always told me we were primarily English and German, with a little Irish thrown in. But this wasn't the information I was really looking for. I scrolled down, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it over the coffee shop chatter, and then I saw it. The section that would change everything. Paternal match. No close paternal relatives found in our database. I stared at those words, reading them over and over. Sure, I was misunderstanding something. No close paternal relatives? That didn't make sense. My dad had to be in their database somehow, right? Maybe he'd never taken a test. Maybe this was just incomplete information, but then I kept reading. Based on your DNA profile, the male who raised you shares approximately 0% DNA with you, indicating no biological relationship. The coffee cup slipped from my hands, crashing to the floor and splattering hot liquid across my jeans. People turned to look, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The words on the screen blurred as tears I didn't even realize I was crying filled my eyes. 0%. 0%. Robert wasn't my father. Not just probably not, or unlikely to be. 0% chance. No biological relationship whatsoever. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Any word on the test yet? I tried to type back, but my hands were shaking so violently I couldn't hit the right letters. A barista came over with paper towels to help clean up the spilled coffee, asking if I was okay, but I couldn't form words. I just sat there, staring at my phone screen. As 25 years of my life rearranged themselves into an entirely different story. The man I'd called Dad my entire life. The man whose approval I desperately sought. The man whose coldness had shaped so much of who I was. He wasn't my father. Had never been my father. But wait, there was more. I scrolled further down, and my blood turned to ice. Close relatives found. Patricia Morales, minus 49.8% DNA match. Likely mother Miguel Santos, 24.1% DNA match. Likely half-brother Carmen Santos, minus 24.0% DNA match. Likely half-sister Patricia Morales. The name hit me like a physical blow. Grandma Rose's story came flooding back. Sweet girl named Patricia, had an affair with a married man, got pregnant, and disappeared. My mom wasn't my mom either. I sat in that coffee shop, surrounded by people living their normal Wednesday afternoon lives, while mine imploded completely. The woman who had raised me, who had sung me lullabies, and packed my lunches and braided my hair, she wasn't my biological mother. And the man who had provided for me, but never loved me, he wasn't my biological father. I was a stranger living in someone else's life. With trembling fingers, I clicked on Patricia Morales' profile. The system showed that she had taken her DNA test just 6 months ago, and her profile included a photo. The woman looking back at me had my exact green eyes, my stubborn chin, my thick, wavy hair. She looked like me in 20 years, or rather, I looked like a younger version of her. The resemblance was so striking it was almost eerie. Her profile said she was 47 years old, lived in Sacramento, California, and had been searching for a daughter born in 1998 in Portland, Oregon. She'd been looking for me. My biological mother, this stranger whose face looked like mine, had been actively searching for me, while I'd been begging for love from parents who weren't even mine. My real mother had been out there, wondering what happened to her daughter. The profile allowed messaging between DNA matches, and I saw that Patricia had already sent me a message. With hands still shaking, I opened it. Sarah, if this is you, I have been waiting 25 years for this day. I know you must have so many questions. I have answers. I never wanted to give you up. Please contact me when you're ready. All my love, Patricia. She knew my name. She'd been waiting for me. She never wanted to give me up. I stumbled out of the coffee shop and somehow made it to my car before completely breaking down. I sat in the parking lot, sobbing until I couldn't breathe, clutching my phone like it was the only real thing left in the world. Everything made sense now. His dad's coldness, his inability to love me, his constant discomfort with my presence. Of course, I wasn't his daughter. He'd been raising another man's child, a constant reminder of his wife's affair. The miracle baby they'd waited 8 years for wasn't a miracle at all. It was a lie. And my mom, Linda, she'd watched me search desperately for my father's love, knowing the entire time that he wasn't my father. She'd let me believe I was somehow defective, somehow unworthy of love. I mean, the truth was, I was living with people who had no biological connection to me at all. I called Jessica, barely able to speak through my tears. "Sarah, what's wrong? Did you get the results?" "He's not my dad," I choked out. "And she's not my mom. They're not my parents, Jess. I'm nobody." "What, Sarah? Slow down. What do you mean, the DNA test? 0% match with my dad. And there's this woman, Patricia, who's been looking for me, my real mom. I'm not who I thought I was." Jessica was quiet for a long moment. "Where are you right now?" "In my car." "In the coffee shop parking lot. I don't know what to do. I'm coming to get you. Don't drive anywhere. Just sit tight." After she hung up, I stared at Patricia's message again. She had answers. She'd been waiting 25 years, but I wasn't ready for answers yet. I was barely ready to accept the questions. As I sat there waiting for Jessica, one thought kept circling through my mind. My entire life had been built on a lie. Every family dinner, every family photo, every time someone said I had my father's nose or my mother's smile, all of it was fiction. The people who raised me had let me believe I belonged to them while knowing I belonged to someone else entirely. And somewhere out there, a woman named Patricia had spent 25 years wondering what happened to her daughter. I wasn't Sarah, the daughter of Robert and Linda, anymore. I was Sarah, the daughter of Patricia Morales, and I had absolutely no idea who that person was supposed to be. Jessica found me 3 hours later, still sitting in my car, staring at my phone screen. She knocked on the window gently, and when I looked up at her, I saw my own devastation reflected in her eyes. "Oh, honey," she whispered as I unlocked the door. She climbed into the passenger seat and pulled me into a hug that finally broke the dam I'd been trying to hold back. I sobbed into her shoulder until I had nothing left. "What am I supposed to do now?" I asked when I could finally speak again. "Do I call them? Do I pretend nothing happened? Do I contact Patricia?" Jessica was quiet for a moment, stroking my hair like my mom, like Linda used to do when I was upset. "What do you want to do? I want answers. I want to know why they lied to me for 25 years. I want to know why they let me think something was wrong with me when they knew the truth the whole time." "Then that's what we do," she said firmly. "But not tonight. Tonight you come to my place. We order way too much Chinese food, and you process this. Tomorrow, we figure out what comes next." But I couldn't wait until tomorrow. That night, after Jessica fell asleep on her couch next to me, I picked up my phone and called my parents' house. It was 1:47 a.m., but I didn't care. My mom, Linda, answered on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep and worry. "Sarah, honey, what's wrong? It's almost 2 a.m. "I know what you did," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I know about Patricia." The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear her breathing quick and shallow, but she said nothing. "I took a DNA test, Linda. I know Robert isn't my father. I know you're not my mother. I know everything." "Sarah, Her voice cracked. "Sweetheart, let me explain." "Explain what?" "Explain how you let me spend my entire life thinking I was defective because my own father couldn't love me. Explain how you watched me beg for his approval while knowing he wasn't even related to me. It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she whispered, and I could hear her crying now. "You weren't supposed to find out." That broke something inside me. I wasn't supposed to find out. I wasn't supposed to find out that I have a biological mother who's been looking for me for 25 years. I wasn't supposed to find out that I have half-siblings I've never met. What was I supposed to do? Live my entire life as a lie? "You're not a lie, Sarah. You're our daughter. You've always been our daughter." "No," I said, and my voice was cold now, controlled. "I'm Patricia Morales' daughter. You just raised me." I heard a door close in the background, Then my dad's Robert's voice, muffled and concerned. "What's going on? Who are you talking to?" "It's Sarah," Linda whispered to him. "She knows." There was a pause, then the phone was taken from Linda. Robert's voice came on the line, clearer and more awake than he should have been at 2 a.m. "Sarah, we need to talk, but not over the phone. Can you come home?" "Home?" I laughed bitterly. "This isn't my home. It aren't my parents. I don't even know who I am anymore." "You're still you," he said, and for the first time in my life, his voice was gentle when he spoke to me. "Nothing about who you are has changed." "Everything has changed," I exploded. "You've spent my entire life treating me like I was some kind of burden, like I was something you had to endure instead of love, and now I know why. I'm not yours. I'm the product of your wife's affair, and you couldn't stand to look at me because I reminded you of that every single day." That's not he started, but I cut him off. "Don't lie to me anymore. I can't handle any more lies, just ... I need time. I need to process this. I need to figure out who I actually am." I hung up before he could respond. For the next 3 days, they called constantly. Linda left tearful voicemails begging me to let them explain, to come home so they could tell me the whole story. Robert left shorter messages, his voice thick with emotion. I'd never heard from him before. "Sarah, please call us back. There's so much you don't understand. Please don't shut us out." But I wasn't ready to hear their explanations. I wasn't ready to hear about how hard it had been for them, or how they'd done their best, or how they'd always loved me despite everything. Because if they'd always loved me, why had Robert spent my entire life acting like he didn't? And if Linda had always loved me, why had she let me believe I was somehow unworthy of my father's affection? Instead, I spent those 3 days researching Patricia Morales. I found her on social media, scrolled through years of photos, learned about her life. She worked as a nurse in Sacramento. She had 2 other children, my half-siblings Miguel and Carmen, who were 23 and 21. She'd never married, but seemed to have a long-term partner named David. In almost every photo, she looked happy, but ... incomplete, like she was always looking just past the camera, searching for something that wasn't there. On the 4th day, I finally messaged her back. "Patricia, this is Sarah. I'm ready to talk if you are. I have so many questions." Her response came within minutes. "Sarah, I've been waiting by my phone since I sent that first message. I can drive to Portland today if you want to meet in person, or we can video chat, or whatever feels comfortable for you. I have waited 25 years to talk to my daughter. I can wait however long you need me to wait now." My daughter. She called me her daughter without hesitation, without qualification. This woman I had never met claimed me more fully in one message than Robert had in 25 years. We arranged a video chat that evening. As the time approached, I found myself more nervous than I'd ever been in my life. I was about to meet my real mother for the first time, and I had no idea what to expect. When her face appeared on my laptop screen at exactly 7 p.m., I gasped. It was like looking at myself in 20 years, but more than that, it was like looking at a version of myself who had never doubted she was loved. "Hi, baby," she said, and her voice broke as she started crying. "Look at you. You're so beautiful. You look like me." "Hi," I whispered back, not knowing what else to say to the woman who gave birth to me but hadn't raised me. "I have so much to tell you," she said, wiping her tears. "And I want to hear everything about your life. But first, I need you to know, giving you up was the hardest thing I've ever done. And not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about you. Not one single day. For the first time in a week, I started crying tears that weren't filled with anger or betrayal. These were tears of recognition, of finally being seen by someone who knew exactly who I was supposed to be. Why? I asked. Why did you give me up? Why didn't you keep me? And for the next 2 hours, Patricia told me a story that explained everything and made everything so much more complicated. "I was 22 when I met Robert," Patricia began, her voice steady, but her eyes filled with old pain. "I was working as a waitress at a diner near the hospital where I was training to be a nurse. He came in every Tuesday for lunch, always ordered the same thing. Turkey sandwich, no pickles, coffee black." My heart stopped. "You met Robert, Mai? The man who raised me?" "Oh, sweetheart," Patricia said softly, "Robert is your biological father." The world tilted again. I thought I'd used up all my shock for one lifetime, but apparently there was more. What? But the DNA test said the DNA test was right about Linda not being your biological mother. But Robert, Sarah, Robert is your father. The reason he could never show you love the way you needed isn't because you weren't his daughter. It's because you were his daughter with another woman, and that destroyed his marriage and his sense of himself as a good man. I couldn't speak, couldn't process. Everything I'd learned, everything I thought I understood, was shifting again. Patricia continued. We had an affair. I knew he was married, and I knew it was wrong, but I was young and stupid and thought I was in love. When I got pregnant, I told him. He was devastated. He said he loved Linda and couldn't leave her, but he also couldn't abandon his child. So what happened? Linda couldn't have children. They'd been trying for years, and it was destroying them both. When Robert told her about the affair and the pregnancy, she had a choice to make. She could leave him, or ... Patricia's voice broke. She could take you and raise you as her own. Pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. She agreed to raise me? More than that, she demanded it. She said if Robert wanted to stay married to her, I had to disappear completely. No contact, no visitation, nothing. I had to give birth and hand you over, and then act like I'd never existed in your lives. But you agreed to that? Patricia was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I was a 22-year-old nursing student with no family support and no money. Robert was an established man with a good job and a stable home. Linda promised they would give you everything. A 2-parent household, financial security, opportunities I couldn't provide. She said they would love you like their own, but they didn't, I whispered. He didn't. No, Patricia said, her voice filled with anguish. And that's my greatest regret. I gave up my daughter believing she would be cherished, and instead, I sentenced you to a lifetime of feeling unloved by the very man who created you. Why couldn't he love me? Patricia was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was filled with a sadness that seemed to come from her bones. Because every time he looked at you, he saw his worst mistake. He saw the moment he betrayed the woman he loved. He saw the choice that made him into someone he didn't recognize. You weren't just his daughter, Sarah. You were his guilt and shame made flesh. The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. Robert was my biological father, but he'd spent my entire life punishing me for existing. He'd let me believe I was somehow defective, somehow unworthy of love, when the truth was that loving me meant confronting his own failures. And Linda. Linda loved you as much as she could, Patricia said. But you were also a constant reminder that her husband had betrayed her. She tried, I think, but you represented everything that was broken in her marriage. So I was raised by my biological father who couldn't stand to look at me, and an adoptive mother who saw me as the product of her husband's affair. I'm so sorry, baby. If I had known... if I had any idea that this was what your life would be like, you would have what? Kept me? Raised me yourself? Yes, she said, without hesitation, in a heartbeat. I thought I was doing what was best for you, but I was just a scared kid who trusted adults to do better than I could. I should have fought for you. We talked until nearly midnight. She told me about Miguel and Carmen, how she'd raised them as a single mother, and made sure they knew every day how loved and wanted they were. She told me about the guilt that had eaten at her for 25 years, wondering if I was happy, wondering if I felt loved, wondering if she'd made the right choice. I've looked for you so many times, she said. But the adoption was closed and I'd signed away all my rights. When DNA testing became available to the public, I took a test immediately, hoping, praying that someday you might take one too. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd taken the DNA test to prove my father wrong, to force him to acknowledge me as his daughter. Instead, I discovered that he was my father, and that was exactly the problem. Over the following weeks, I had several more conversations with Patricia. I also, eventually, agreed to meet with Robert and Linda. That conversation was harder than anything I'd ever done. Robert cried. Actually cried, which I'd never seen in my entire life. He apologized for 25 years of emotional distance, tried to explain that his inability to show me love wasn't about my worth, but about his shame. I tried, he said, his voice broken. I tried to be the father you deserved, but every time I looked at you, I saw what I'd done to Linda, what I'd done to our marriage, what I'd done to your birth mother. You deserved better than that, Sarah. You deserved so much better. Linda apologized too, for letting me believe I was somehow unlovable, when she knew the truth of our complicated family dynamic. "I tried to love you like my own," she said, "but I was so hurt and angry, and you were so innocent, and I didn't know how to separate those things." Those conversations didn't fix 25 years of damage overnight. They didn't erase the pain or instantly create the loving relationships I'd always craved. But they gave me understanding, and understanding, I learned, was its own kind of healing. I've built a relationship with Patricia now. I've met Miguel and Carmen, my half-siblings, who welcomed me with the kind of open, uncomplicated love I'd always imagined siblings should have. I've learned about my Mexican and indigenous heritage, tried foods from my biological culture, learned phrases in Spanish that feel somehow familiar on my tongue. My relationship with Robert and Linda is complicated. We're working on it in family therapy, trying to rebuild something that was broken from the very beginning. Some days are better than others. Some days Robert looks at me and I can see him fighting his old demons. But now I understand that those demons were never about me. I've learned that families are messier than I ever imagined, that love isn't always enough, that good intentions can still cause tremendous damage, that sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who think they're protecting you. But I've also learned that it's never too late to find where you truly belong, that DNA doesn't determine love, but understanding your DNA can explain a lot about why love was missing, that you can grieve the childhood you should have had while still building the future you deserve. I look at myself in the mirror now, and I see Patricia's green eyes, Robert's stubborn chin, something that's entirely my own. I know who I am now. Not just Sarah the daughter desperate for approval, but Sarah the woman who survived a complicated origin story and came out stronger. The truth didn't set me free the way I thought it would, but it gave me something better than freedom. It gave me the power to choose my own family, my own story, my own ending, and that I've learned is worth everything.